Walt, the United States Commerce Department came out with a proposed ruling that would effectively ban Chinese and Russian autonomous vehicles in the United States. Why act now, do you think?
So the latest, so there's always something new, Grayson, right? There's always some new agency. This is from the Commerce Department. What specifically are they banning? Are they banning vehicles? Are they banning parts? I mean, what are we talking about here?
So the technical legal language is hardware and software integrated into the vehicle connectivity system and software integrated into the automated driving system is the technical ruling.
So not necessarily the complete car, but even the parts themselves. So like if we were to size the market, because I'm not sure how much Russian and Chinese parts exist today that come into the market.
Small. The China size, this was shocking to me. In 2023, the United States only imported $14.4 billion of auto parts from China.
$14.4 billion or actual physical components?
Dollars of components. Very small market.
Okay. Right. So yeah, in the grand scheme of things, not massive. Right. So your point is that this addresses a smaller. So do you think that this could then lead to bigger movements by commerce? Is commerce the weapon that our government is going to utilize the most in order to affect this defense of our country's technology?
Potentially. It's the ruling, as comprehensive as it is, still leaves a lot of open-ended questions. One open-ended question that's being debated, and I'm not a lawyer, but it's being debated, is how does this affect LiDAR, especially Hesai? And then it was really interesting, speaking to lobbyists on the Hill this week, they said, did you notice this paragraph? Waymo got a carve out for the Zeekr vehicle. So Waymo could still use the Zeekr vehicle because, quote unquote, the vehicle has no connectivity. So Google's lobbyists did pretty good on that one. But there's circles going around the Hill that a second proposed rulemaking's coming out from Commerce. Could they look to close those loopholes, look to potentially ban Hesai?
Look, we'll see what happens. I mean, there's already definitely a movement, and I think it's clearly easier to move against bans that relate to autonomy than EV, because EV, you could argue, benefits the environment. Autonomy, you don't have that type of benefit, and there's many more benefits in terms of protecting U.S. companies' technology and safety, in terms of you're literally talking about the control of those vehicles. What's interesting, though, is there's been a lot of talk about TikTok, on the other hand, on the media side. It's had momentum on occasions. Right now, it's kind of stalled with court challenges. There's not many people believe that it's going to ultimately end in a ban. There's a certain amount of interdependence with these economies. And I think, sometimes it's fun and I think not impossible that we're going to have massive trade wars that exist, and people refer often to Taiwan. But just look at this moment in history where just this week, the Chinese government had to inject massive stimulus because of their concerns about their economy and assets values in that country and real estate. For investors out there, you could have made a lot of money owning some ETFs of the Chinese market. Those things are I think, up another 8% today. They were up like 8 to 10% a couple of days ago. The point is, though, that China's not necessarily in a position of strength to enter into a trade war. That potentially gives the Americans a little bit of a stronger position. But again, this interdependency, I think, probably of the economies probably prevents some major back and forth. I've always risked this. We cover Apple. I risk this as a risk, in terms of Apple. Certainly that government can do things that they've already encouraged maybe their consumers to buy local products. They can do other stuff which they have historically, having covered Qualcomm years ago, had major impacts on Qualcomm from time to time. There's that potential. It just doesn't seem to be getting to that point. So yeah, it's interesting commerce. I think there's also some local actions as well that want to step into everyone kind of wants this to be their jurisdiction. What happened in Texas this week, Grayson?
What happened in Texas is there's movement. There's a hearing on 10/10 on Robotaxi Day of all days, where we'll give the Texas DMV the rights to regulate and take off autonomous vehicles and autonomous trucks if passed and signed by the governor in the state of Texas. What's driving this? I don't know. It's interesting if you look at the lobbying efforts around this pending bill coming out of the Texas House is the traditional automakers, both the Detroit Big Three and European OEMs, are lobbying aggressively to have personally owned autonomous vehicles not part of the bill. That to me was a really interesting sign and points to that growing market in the dependence that these large OEMs are putting on it.
I mean, if I didn't do that, and if they didn't do that, excuse me, and I bought a Tesla in a neighboring state, and I put my self-driving car on, like you just did, and if anyone hasn't seen Grayson's video, has a great video going from the airport to the breakers. Are they claiming that they would regulate me once I drove over the state border? Because I can drive my Lincoln Navigator right now to Texas, which is registered in New York, and they have no say over how that product is regulated. So they claim, I guess, those that are saying don't do it for the personal vehicles are saying don't do that. But is Texas as a state thinking that like that's a possibility, that they're going to every time you drive from state to state, I'm going to have to deal with the regulations of the next state over?
It's potentially possible. If that happened, it's an utter disaster, especially on the personally owned autonomous vehicles, where Tesla, from a legal regulatory standpoint, classifies it as a level 2 system. I can tell you, having owned it and drive, it's not a level 2 system. It's not a level 2 plus, or you want to use level 2 plus plus. It's a high level 3 system. It's not a level 4 system, but it's getting there. It's only a matter of time until they crack full self-driving. And can you imagine if you're in Texas and you wanted to go to Arizona, or you wanted to go to Oklahoma, and it turns off over state lines, you've got a very big problem there, which raises the importance that's been lobbying for years, is we need a national autonomous vehicle framework to usher in the future of autonomy in America. The Secretary of Commerce out there talking about this, is the Chinese are spying on us. We had a report in the Wall Street Journal and Your Old World and telcos about spying on the networks. If it's such a national security issue, why not pass a national autonomous vehicle framework to usher this technology to allow it to function over state lines, so companies are not dependent or looking to depend on China?
I agree, and it works both ways, right? You can help support the technology by creating a federal framework so that these companies that are investing money, hiring Americans to develop technologies, don't have to fight state by state to have their vehicles, whether they're car or trucks, work across state lines. But also, on the same token, protect us from safety, right? So, if someone was potentially influenced by, we had the mayor of New York potentially influenced by the country of Turkey. Like, you have one state being influenced on how cars are being approved in their state versus a federal framework. I mean, it seems that it helps you for growth and it helps you for safety, and it certainly eliminates a lot of the headaches for the end user, the consumer, the person actually using these products. So it's probably easier to do companies, because they're looking at someone like Waymo, who can obviously geofence what they're doing. I mean, maybe that's the theory, like let private vehicles do it, but don't let someone who's a fleet or provide more regulation. But I don't know, that doesn't seem like the right way to go in terms of this technology going forward.
It's not the right way to go. It's going to turn into a massive headache. And then from a regulatory standpoint, how are you going to enforce it over state lines? Is there going to be a magic ODD that turns the car off? Could you imagine the consumer uproar from that? If you look at, your cell phone, you go over one state to another and you have roaming again, there'd be an uproar.
And how are you going to finance it? When you were saying that sentence, I was like finishing your sentence, and you went to the consumer side. I went to the money side, which is like, how are you going to finance it if you're dealing with this situation where you got to worry about whatever the regulation is in every state or province or town? I mean, it's not necessarily the way to go. What's happening around the world, though? Now that we've covered what's happening in the U.S., I hear that Uber has signed up another autonomous company. Where are we this time?
We're in the UAE. DAR is continuing to wheel and deal. WeRide is now going to be available on the Uber platform. Congratulations to DAR and the entire team on your autonomy strategy. Also in the UAE, who's been operating there in Dubai for quite a while, is Cruise. I believe it's 1 or 2 vehicles. Perhaps we see another announcement where Cruise gets added to the Uber platform in the UAE, and Uber's just going to continue to rack up these deals globally, which opens the big question: how is Lyft going to compete with all these if Uber keeps doing deal after deal after deal?
I mean, Risher, the CEO, has said that they will line up. We'll look forward to seeing those deals get announced. But you mentioned WeRide. WeRide, wasn't that the company that filed to go public and then pulled the filing? Or am I confusing that with someone else?
You're 100% correct. They didn't get as far as Didi did. They filed to go public on the New York Stock Exchange, and then lo and behold, they did not go public.
So what's your sense there? And does an Uber relationship perhaps help them improve their profile? Right? I mean, Uber, like we've talked in the past about Waymo, obviously a huge company as a subsidiary of Google, but and that necessary Uber relationship. But to then Uber become kingmaker for maybe not struggling, but earlier stage or less developed autonomous car companies out there to kind of help them along.
I don't know if they become kingmakers. I like the strategy because Uber has nothing to lose, especially if you look at the way that autonomy is evolving. You are going to have Chinese technology in certain pockets, the UAE, perhaps certain pockets in Europe will start to emerge. But when I read the S1 filing for WeRide, this stood out to me as uninvestable. They said, and this is in quote in an SEC doc, we're the only company to have a true L2 to L4 system, which is factually incorrect. And that stood out to me. How can you put that in an SEC filing? Lo and behold, they didn't go. But Uber's just going to do deals with everybody because they have nothing to lose. They're going to collect a fee if the local government of the UAE or Abu Dhabi or Dubai, wherever they are in the UAE, wants to allow them to operate, and Uber's going to get a fee. Good for Uber. Good for Uber shareholders.
Yeah, I think they're just flexing. I mean, you brought up, again, Lyft. This is the difference between Uber and Lyft. Like, Uber's in these markets and Lyft is North America. So that's a benefit. Maybe the answer for Lyft is to sign up Zoox because Uber still hasn't signed up Zoox. Or maybe Zoox wants to just go it alone and doesn't agree with the Autonomy Markets view of partnering with a rideshare company to drive. Like, what's going on with Zoox? How come we haven't seen something with Uber or Lyft?
Zoox has been publicly stating, this is great. You want to talk about vagueness. When are you launching, quote unquote, soon? What are you doing for strategy? Going it alone. You were in San Francisco recently. I was out in the Bay. 15 minutes for a vehicle, you're not going to want to wait. In order for Zoox to scale, this is my opinion, they are going to have to get on the Uber platform. Consumers are not going to want to have 6 to 7 different apps to download to pick out which autonomous ride they're going to want it on time. The interesting thing about Zoox, and these have been reported all over Reddit and X, that there's been photos that the Highlanders are starting to test more and more in San Francisco. And then I'm starting to hear chatter. This is unconfirmed chatter, but this is important for our audience. And we saw a piece that relates to this in the New York Times around Zoox's remote control abilities. I've heard through multiple sources that the Zoox toaster mobile is not functioning and it's not ready for prime time, that Zoox is going to launch with the Toyota Highlanders, not the Zoox mobile. And if that happens, that's a big, interesting change in the market.
I don't understand, why would that be the case? Like, if your technology works, why does the physical construction of where people are sitting impact whether it works or not? Like, why would it work on a Highlander and not that very comfortable, as you call it, toaster? the mobile toaster. That doesn't make sense to me. What's the issue there, as far as you can guess?
Different architecture, different hardware architecture, different design elements, different controllers. The whole thing is different.
So it's a completely different construction that the hardware that they put together and system that they put together. They just didn't basically do what they were developing and just slap it on the same equipment.
Correct. They built it from the ground up, and if you let's put the Wall Street hat on. The economics, I love to know what the economics are to build that thing and how expensive, because it's hand built in Foster City, California. Your labor costs are astronomical before we can get to the hardware costs.
I mean, but the argument there is no different than the Tesla argument. I mean, I've visited their manufacturing facilities, and you go from the ground up, and yes, it's expensive at first, but ultimately, if you design something on your own and you make it on your own and you're not relying on third parties, that's ultimately what drives costs down. That's how the same thing happened with Starlink. Starlink, no one thought that they could get the consumer premise equipment under $1,000. I've saved the tweets of the haters saying that would never happen, and here we are, much lower and then getting massive scale. So, that vertical integration is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you can execute on it, right, and deliver a product that works. And I guess that's your argument, is that is not necessarily working right now for them.
Amazon's not in the manufacturing business. In my opinion, it makes more sense to hire Magna now to build the vehicle, or hire Magna if you want to invest the $1 billion of CapEx to build it out. But I truly believe that the consumers do not want to face one another. I know you and I disagree on that, but I don't want to face somebody, and I don't want to share a ride with somebody.
You don't have to face somebody. I mean, go to London. You can go in those taxis, and you don't have to. But you can have plenty of legroom and put your lovely bags on the seat in front of you. I know that's their business model, but that's like a pivotable business model. That's when I hear these telcos and they say, "Oh, we have this new rate plan." Back in the old days, that mattered. AT&T had Digital One rate. It was very hard to replicate that. You can just change that view and say, we're not going to have it as a shared vehicle. We're going to have it as, a single ride vehicle. And maybe the seats could be a little bit more comfortable, but I would rather personally ride in the Zoox toaster oven, assuming that it worked, than I would in the Jag that Waymo had me in, just because it felt to me a bit more cramped.
The experience in the Zoox vehicle, if it does work, much better. But if they force you to share it, but this raises the culture class. If you look at Amazon, Mr. Andy Jassy is publicly out there stating 5 days a week mandatory back in the absence of blowback, so that you're going to run into that issue there. And then what happens?
Yeah, they have to. At the end of the day, you run a business, and I think Amazon has run a great business, and you have to pivot to things that make you money. And there's been countless things that Uber has gone through over the years where they've pivoted to do the right thing. But look, let's put all this aside, because that's whether Zoox will be long-term successful. The real question is, they should be at a point that they can get something done today with Uber and Lyft, unless you're arguing that the people at Uber are saying like, no, until we see that you can get to some reasonable amount of scale, we're not doing business. And then that gets almost to the point of like Uber being a kingmaker, which is like, okay, are they rejecting Zoox and saying you're not good enough? You don't have enough scale for us to even put a press release out to say that you're on the same platform as us?
It's not about scale. Look at Cruise. They're not publicly operating a paid service yet, but yet they're on the platform. I just think Zoox doesn't want to do it. They're determined to do it their own way. If you want to go back their own way, and I know Tim Kentley Clay and Jesse way back when they wanted to get the VIN number for the original one, they wanted to have the name Zoox spelled out in the VIN number. So they wanted to build this whole bespoke process. That maybe it's just the Zoox way.
Okay, and that could ultimately be a critical error. But I think it's still a little early for them. We'll see if they can. Let's get some more product on the road in San Francisco. I mean, look, Waymo in San Francisco doesn't use Uber, and that's, they've been getting obviously lots of miles done in San Francisco. Speaking of Waymo, I don't know if this is our podcast or that it's just reality, but I've been getting a lot of inbounds in the last couple of weeks of people in LA, friends in LA, visiting or otherwise, noticing a lot more Waymo on the road in LA. I think there was one LA Waymo that was unfortunately vandalized this week. I think they've had that similar issue in San Francisco, but that's a different story altogether. My question is, the next inbound that I get from these people is, I see them everywhere. Well, why can't I get my activation code? Why can't I just download the app and try it like you did in San Francisco? What is going on with this? Because I think they originally launched this thing back in the spring, March or April. Maybe there wasn't enough Waymos in LA, March or April. But here we are 5 months later-ish. There clearly seems to be a lot of these Waymos driving around LA. Why aren't they opening the app up to everybody?
I would say we're a month away, maybe 2, from Waymo opening the app to everybody. That's a prediction, and I'll go on the record and stand by that.
Ooh, prediction. I like it. We should our podcast should have like a special effect that comes in. We have to edit a special effect. But prediction, we're a month away.
I like that. Well, come on down. Bob Barker will invite us down to LA. But month to 2 months away, it's the size of the fleet. I believe that Waymo, their deep operations are getting mature. They're going to have enough fleet to meet the demand. One of the biggest critiques of Waymo, as you've publicly addressed in individuals countless times, is the wait time. And now that Magna has been working overtime and upfitting the JLRs that are starting to come into LA, I believe that we're a month to 2 months away from Waymo truly scaling operations and opening the public in LA. When they do that, and having lived in there and in and around LA half of my life, there's a big bone I have to pick with Waymo. Service wouldn't work for somebody like me. It doesn't go north of Sunset. That's a very, very big problem.
Not everyone has your knowledge of LA. I'm familiar with Sunset, but why is that such a deal breaker? What is so great north of Sunset?
So north of Sunset, there's 2 iconics, both owned by the Georgia. The Beverly Hills Hotel. You cannot take it to the Beverly Hills Hotel. You cannot take it to the Hotel Bel Air. You cannot go to the Bel Air Country Club. You cannot go to most individuals' homes that live north of Sunset. Then you're eliminating the Hollywood Hills. You're eliminating a lot of the residential access that would use the vehicle. And to me, is a big issue, because if you look at this, I have this whole theory. So the Oscars are held down in Hollywood Boulevard at Mann's Chinese Theater. And most of the celebrities, they get ready. There's a very famous Faye Dunaway photo from Beverly Hills Hotel. It's that only in LA moment. That's what Waymo has to usher in. They have to tap into the Hollywood culture and go north of Sunset and just tie into the culture.
I mean, so where do they do all these award shows? As long as they have service there, you can have all the people dropped off for the red carpet in their Waymos. That would be a good advertising thing. But look, forget about Sunset for a second. Let's go back to San Francisco. It doesn't go to the airport. And that's one of the biggest opportunities in rideshare is going to the airport. That would seem like a pretty big milestone, even in San Francisco, to expand that service area to give airport rides to people down to San Francisco. What's the timeline on that?
Technically, they could do it tomorrow. Regulatory is probably going to be a year to 18 months.
Boom! Here we go again. So I travel a lot as I don't remember as much San Francisco, but there's plenty of airports that I've gone into where I've got to walk, feels like 2 miles, to get to an Uber pickup and drop off point. I think LaGuardia has that now. What's the holdup here? It's not like you're taking these cars into an environment where there's a ton of people. You can literally create a parking lot. I'm sure they'd be happy to put a bus, a shuttle bus there and have a drop off and pickup point for autonomous vehicles.
Very simple. Unelected bureaucrats with political agendas. Plain simple. I'm not going to name names here, but I know a lot of these individuals, and it's driven by political ideology. If you want to go look at what LA's done around what they're trying to do with the mobility data standard, that was a horrible idea. In the way that they wrote that the city of LA would have the legal authority to take over an autonomous vehicle and bring it to a stop.
So does LA in their service area for Waymo include the airport?
No, but it should. If you look at the disaster of getting we should have Harry Campbell on here. Look at the disaster of getting an Uber at the airport. You have to hop on a shuttle and go to this remote lot. In the old days, it was curbside. That's what it should be, because what you're doing and this is what the unelected bureaucrats don't financially understand. They don't understand economics. You're hurting your tourism business. If you're having to go through all this struggle because you're trying to force people into a taxi, you're hurting tourism. Well, I don't want to go. It's a pain in the neck to get out from the airport. You're hurting your economic tourism. And I don't know why the Chamber of Commerce don't push back. The California Tourism Board doesn't push back. I don't know why there's not more pushback, because if I'm California, this becomes an economic driver for tourism dollars.
I hear you. But here's how you get people like that to move forward. It's public pressure. Right. And I think this gets back to something we've talked at on prior podcasts. In the comms for these companies has been weak. Maybe they've been trying to protect trade secrets or whatever it is, but it's too weak. And what they need at Waymo or at GM Cruise or at Zoox is like a John Legere type to come in and highlight every single fucking milestone. Meaning, like T-Mobile, when 5G was launching, 5G launches in like Scarsdale, and they would literally put a press release. 5G is now active in Scarsdale because they put a 5G radio in one tower in Scarsdale, and that's a press release. Like Waymo should be we just added 10 more cars to the network in LA, and once we get up to some certain number of cars, you people of LA, try it. Like there needs to be more emphasis on this. Not because they need more rides or they're trying to drive revenue. And I get the concept of customer acquisition cost being. This is not about customer acquisition cost. This is about laying the groundwork of public support so that you can unleash revenue opportunities like the airport, because public officials are going to be under such pressure of why doesn't this product work there? You don't have to do it the Travis way. You can do it again of just promoting every step that you're doing. And look, they just do a terrible job of that across the board in across this entire industry. The guy that does it the best is Elon. The challenge there is that Elon says a lot of different things. So from the promotion of some of his products to some of his, other things that he's constantly tweeting about, it becomes kind of, its own thing. But again, I think as an industry that would help. But you live this world. Is that true, or is that wishful thinking?
It's true. The communications for most part of the autonomous industry stink. That's one of the main reasons why I started the Road to Autonomy, was to highlight and tell these stories. Even though the Road to Autonomy colors are not magenta, we're blue, you need that CEO out there trumpeting major milestones to build public confidence, build public support, because get the public on your side.
Excitement. Yeah, right. Because on the flip side, you're at the whim of the Today Show host, profiling your car that's getting vandalized, by a bunch of people that claim that the thing bumped somebody, or, all the negative things as opposed to the positive. And it just doesn't seem that hard. People care about technology. They care about like, just hearing about the milestone. Oh, 20 more cars, 30 more cars, or build up the hype of the fact that you need this access code and have more people. We have 1 million people that have requested an access code to use a Waymo in LA. You don't think that's going to resonate with politicians and with investors that are looking to invest in this space for the things that are going to be required, to move this thing forward? Of course it is. Of course it is.
If you look at the industry, we went through a major hype cycle where there's a lot of promises, but now we actually have meaningful data and scaling. And we need a PT Barnum. We need somebody out there trumpeting this stuff and building the hype and saying, Waymo just added the 10,000th car to the fleet. We've just completed X amount of rides. The industry gets so bogged down in safety data. Wall Street doesn't care about safety data. They care about economic data. The public wants to know, when's the service coming and how's it going to impact my life? That's what they want to know.
And milestones. Dude, our clients would eat up the milestones of number of cars, number of miles, like weekly or quarter, whatever it is, some type of, look, to give Google credit, they do give stuff on their earnings call. Amazon obviously does not. But yeah, I think we clearly need more of that. And look, the flip side of this is companies that are failing. And you have Luminar that I had, a 30% cut this week. I think there was something else. Someone else had Intel, right? Intel, obviously, Intel's troubles are not because of Mobileye, but you had rumors of, or reports at least of Qualcomm potentially buying Intel. That's just underscoring the problems that Intel has as a company, and where does Mobileye as a subsidiary where do they even end up, and what happened to them in this process? And where are we with LiDAR? If Luminar is cutting 30%, what does that mean for LiDAR? Is that just more validation of the Elon view of the world of no need for LiDAR? Potentially.
If you look at Luminar, the market cap's currently $461 million. Since they went public as a SPAC and de-SPAC, stock's down 91%. That's a dramatic decline the wrong way. The market is moving away from LiDAR for every and all application because of cost. There are reports from analysts, reports in the news that Austin Russell, the CEO of Luminar, is distracted. We saw that he tried to buy Forbes. Why are you trying to buy Forbes when your company is going belly up? No comment there, but there's a clear public mark around distraction. LiDAR will still be very useful in certain applications. I still believe today you need it for Class 8 18-wheeler trucks. We were in the Kodiak truck. They have LiDAR. You need it for certain defense applications. You need it for certain dense applications of robotaxis like Waymo. But as we go forward towards personally owned, the days of LiDAR become the dominant sensor are over, and it's being driven by the advancements in computer vision, the advancements in embodied AI, and just the overall decline in LiDAR innovation. It's just not there.
Well, that's the good and the bad, I guess. Getting back to the good, I hope, invites have started to go out for the big Tesla event coming up on, October 10th? What's it called?
WeRobot.
Did Isaac Asimov write iRobot? I know Elon's a big Asimov fan, and he's read the trilogy, and he lists them among his favorite books. Did Asimov also write iRobot?
Yes, he did.
You got to respect Elon for at least integrating that. There was another robot television show where it was I think they hacked everyone's bank accounts and reduced all student debt to zero. I forget what it was at AMC? I can't remember.
It's a thriller, but if you look at the invitation, I'm dissecting as an Apple invitation, there's clearly a picture of a camera. There's a picture of a camera on there, and it's clearly saying that this is going to be a camera-only approach to robotaxi, despite the rumors, there's going to be LiDAR. There's not going to be LiDAR. I'm going to be very curious, does the sensor suite change? So they add more cameras, they put cameras in different locations. That will be very interesting to see. Do they perhaps announce hardware 5 with it? The self-driving hardware will be very interesting to see. And then with the WeRobot, it says to me, Optimus is going to make a surprise appearance here.
Maybe. That would be interesting. The other thing I wonder about is, in my world, when a company has a big announcement to make or an event planned, that the competing companies like to try and throw out their announcements like the day before in order to try and steal some of the thunder, or at least be mentioned during the news cycle that's driven by the event. What do you think? Who do you think has something in the works that could drop the week of the WeRobot Elon full self-driving Tesla event?
2 days before on 10/8, GM Investor Day, did they make a big announcement around Cruise? Miss Barr is publicly out there stating she's all in on Cruise. Did they make a big announcement to try and move the market forward? Does she shed more light as she did in the last earnings call around perhaps a personally owned autonomous vehicle powered by Cruise? That would be market moving, in my opinion. That would really set the stakes high. And that's going to force Elon and Tesla to come out and say, we're doing the robotaxi, we're vertically integrating into the vehicle. And then GM is going to have to counter with that and say, okay, yes, we're going to bundle a Cruise subscription with the personally owned AV. Or does GM just get ahead of all this and announce it on 10/8? That would carry over into 10/9, at least until the early evening of 10/10, until Elon hits the stage at 7 o'clock Pacific time.
So let's assume that they do, and it's something interesting. What's the over-under on Elon during his presentation ripping into whatever they announce? I mean, and is that good or bad? When we talk about news cycles, is that good or bad? Because then you're at least mentioned, and people, when they're talking about autonomy, they're like, oh, and by the way, GM has got this going for you GM owners. Cruise is on its way. Or does it end up being an error because Elon just dresses down whatever GM announces 2 days prior to his event?
I view it as a positive catalyst for GM. I give it a 60% chance Mr. Musk makes a statement or an offhanded, perhaps in the Q&A. Because what the Tesla fanboys, the Tesla retail shareholders community, and most individuals that cover Tesla do not understand, GM is the only company today that has a credible shot of competing with Tesla as we go into the future of robotaxis combined with personal autonomous vehicles. They're the only company that has a clear shot of doing that today because they've made their statements public. Waymo has an opportunity to do it if they can make a lighter version of their stack and they start to message to the market that they're going to do it. But right now, at this point, the closest competitor to Tesla in the future of autonomy is GM.
So what are the odds then that Waymo does do that and licenses that technology to an automaker, or take the Android approach to anyone that wants to implement that for private car use?
Waymo has a team now working on a stack for a personal autonomous vehicle. I said it, and now it's public. They have a team, very small team. I have not been briefed on the business plans. I have not seen the business plans of where they want to go.
My pushback on that, Grayson, would be Apple has teams for everything, and I would guess that Apple also has a team, and they have teams that compete with teams. So I think it's great. I mean, I think it's interesting that they would have a team that develop, and you would almost expect it. But as we both know, with these large companies, that doesn't necessarily mean that it ends up getting to a commercial product or even acknowledged at any point before it's killed. How many major product developments has Apple has had that they never even acknowledged, even though they staffed up and then they ultimately killed them? Maybe what we need is Jony Ive, Sam Altman, and some third party to make the ultimate autonomous AI phone vehicle. No, can you figure out a phone in there somewhere? What do you think?
A phone vo. You make a phone vo.
Apparently Johnny will give you a design for a couple $100,000. Why doesn't Amazon or Zoox just ask him to design their next version of the toaster oven?
You want to talk about buzz in the marketplace? Jony Ive designed the next Zoox vehicle. If a lot of buzz that would come along with that. Look at the Montclair button. All the buzz that the button on a Montclair jacket's getting because Jony Ive Love From did it. But getting back to Apple, do you, and I have an opinion on this, but I want your opinion first. Do you feel that it was a mistake for Apple to prematurely shut down Project Titan?
Of course. I mean, we don't know where they were in this technology, but I mean, they generate tens of billions of dollars of free cash flow. And, look, shareholders always typically want repurchase or dividends, but only when the company can't, like from Verizon, they have nothing else to invest in. So sure, give it back to me in dividends. If you're Apple, you're in a unique position. You have a unique group of individuals that you've been able to hire because you're Apple, any of these large companies, that others don't. And look, you and I both agree on the opportunity that exists. So why not, I think, can kind of continue it. I think the market is still early. But, like we said about Google, just because these companies are large doesn't mean that they can necessarily be successful. And there's countless products that Apple has attempted that have been, flops. God forbid any Apple zealot would agree with that, but it's true. Yeah, I think it was a mistake. But look, they obviously know more about where they were with that development than we do.
They were further along than was ever publicly disclosed. No surprise there with Apple. And I looked, and you did a really good report on the Light Shed about this around Apple Intelligence. They're now having to license OpenAI. Let's fast forward a decade from now. Does Apple say, uh-oh, we made a mistake, and they have to go license the stack from somebody? And then they're playing catch up as the market eventually turns to autonomy being the new hot thing?
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're just happy to be, the screen that's in your pocket, and hopefully that never for them changes in terms of the input output that exists that we have. But I think there's clearly risk to that. Obviously, these are massive markets that they're in that they've developed. So this is just one that, they're letting pass. And look, I don't, depending on how the government changes, doing M&A, as you suggest, in the future, licensing it, sure, but doing M&A in the future is obviously going to be increasingly more difficult, I think, regardless of who is in office, because I think, clearly there is risk with these companies having power across, multiple different segments. Maybe that was the issue. Maybe they realized that development was only going to get them so far, and they were going to have to start doing more and more M&A, and they realized that was going to be more problematic for them as a company. So they're just like, we need to push this elsewhere and hopefully partner in the future.
Staying on the partner thing, I'm going to throw a curveball at you. Your partner, Rich Greenfield, recently tried on the Snap AR glasses. We had announcements yesterday from Meta around AR. Chris Cox did an interview around it. Do you see a future where Meta licensed their AR glass technology and puts it in cars and creates a whole new revenue stream? I say that as Facebook does have an automotive vision, mostly focused on advertising, but it could interestingly scale there.
And put glasses in the car, and you go in the car?
No, make the whole glass augmented.
Of the car itself.
Of the car itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be amazing. Sure. And certainly, if you think about the technology and the ability to do that, I mean, I remember at CES last year seeing those televisions that you could see through and just thinking like, oh, well, that's exactly what we want to get to. That technology theoretically is what you want to get to with Vision Pro, where it's just you can see through, but then having the augmentation there is clearly easier to implement that on larger screens. By definition, your windshield is a larger screen. So it's theoretically the same. I forget who was it that was it Panasonic that I guess had done the see-through screens, or maybe it was Samsung. I think that would be phenomenal. Talking about advertising, you're driving by and like the advertising pops up. You still see everything around you, but the advertising pops up about whatever it is, augmented reality. Yeah, I mean, I think that is, and we're seeing on the private side through Lightshed Ventures companies that are making a lot of investments in those areas. So yeah, I think that's certainly interesting. And I think to the points that you've made on the road to autonomy, the need to find incremental revenue streams in advertising and experiences within the car. And, your windshield to a certain extent becomes a gigantic advertising screen if you can implement some augmented reality into the screen itself, into the windshield itself.
And that becomes a giant growth for Meta. Years ago, Alphabet acquired a company called Fire, PHIAR. I was very bullish on them. We're on the Road to Autonomy podcast. It's very similar to that, to augment that. Ford this week got granted a patent to put ads on infotainment, but I truly believe it's going to the glass. The future of autonomy is going to be defined by experiences at the end of the day.
What do you know, if anything, about the Ford patent? Like what were they achieving through that patent?
The ability to serve ads on an infotainment system, but the days of the infotainment system are coming to an end.
But how do you get a patent on that? Because if I hop in the back of a taxi, I've got, I guess, an infotainment system serving me commercials and news and weather already, right? So I wonder what patent is. I'm gonna have to look into that one, Grayson. And for our patent experts out there, please, send us your analysis. But it certainly indicates intent in these things that you've talked about a lot on Road to Autonomy. I just question. It's almost like, who was one of the regulators? I think it was actually Lena Khan, to her credit on this case, was talking on 60 Minutes, right? Grayson, you ever watch 60 Minutes? Can you imagine Grayson watching Lena Khan on 60 Minutes? But she talked about the patents on inhalers and the plastic thing and how ridiculous getting So what I want to figure out is this Ford patent, the inhaler connector that Lena Khan has referred to as the problem with some of these business, or is it a real patent that does something interesting? Ford, I know you're listening. Reach out to us and let us know.
Let us know. Love to have you on here. We would love to get some clarity of what you're going to do with the Ford Pro line. Are you going to integrate autonomy into Ford Pro, which is your financial juggernaut? Walt, it's been an interesting week in autonomy. Some big breakthroughs. We're all leading up to 1010. What should our listeners and viewers look for over the coming week in the autonomy markets.
The next week is just going to be, again, the speculation now that the invites are out are going to start kicking in full gear. And then look, end of the quarter is 9:30. So then we're going to start talking about who's reporting what and how numbers look for the quarter. How does the economy look overall? And that obviously is all important for what's going on in the autonomy space.
And we can even have a rate cut debate, 25 or 50.
Exactly.
The future's bright. The future's autonomous. The future is autonomy experiences.